Good afternoon. I'm Adele Johnson, Executive Director of the Black History Museum and Cultural Center of Virginia. Welcome to our new community conversation series called Voices for Change. We're so glad to have you with us today. You know, at the Black History Museum, our mission is to preserve stories that inspire. So we tell the untold stories, the undertold stories, and sometimes forgotten stories about African Americans who have done great things. We talk about the triumphs of our ancestors, and we also celebrate the heroes of today. I would love nothing more than just to bring you greetings and to invite you to visit the Black History Museum, to see our featured exhibition. It is absolutely wonderful. It's titled Paradox of Liberty, Slavery at Jefferson's Monticello. And this exhibition gives voice to the 607 enslaved children, women, and men who built and maintained Monticello. It is timely that we have this exhibition because it helps to introduce a conversation about the impact that slavery has on us today. Unfortunately, our museum is closed right now temporarily because of COVID-19, but we're going to reopen soon, and we certainly look forward to having you visit. We're excited, however, that you have joined our community conversation today, and we invite you to send your comments to us as well as post them on social media. The overarching goal of Voices for Change is also to inspire changes in perception, changes in attitude, changes in action. We know that social injustices against people of color, particularly Black people, are not going to be resolved overnight. The issues are much larger and much deeper than a series of conversations, and the wounds will take years to heal. However, our hope is that these conversations will serve as a catalyst for people to take time to reflect on who we are, what we stand for, and what we can do individually to make tomorrow better. Ultimately, when individuals act, systems change. And it is for this reason that the Black History Museum is hosting this series. So welcome. Today and over the next few weeks, you will hear from several people, some of whom you recognize and know well, and others that you may not know at all. And that's because everyone's opinion is important. We believe that each of us has a story, and that sharing our personal stories will help to foster productive conversations and understanding. During the program, we're going to pose some questions to you, and we'll put your combined responses on the screen. So please participate because we want to know what you're thinking too. Today's theme is protest. So let's begin.
I am touched, proud, encouraged, and inspired by the mass and diversity of people who have come together to share their collective voices in the protest of the murder of George Floyd. People are tired, people want change. They want to see change in this country. As a Black man, it is painful to see Black people killed by those who are sworn to protect and serve. This protest is a reaction to that pain. People are tired. People are tired of the injustice. People are tired of the hate. America has got to do better. America has got to change. We watched in horror as a man's life was taken right before our eyes. It touched us deep in our soul. It touched a nerve. People rose up. People said enough is enough. People said no to the hate. People said no to the systemic racism. When you couple that with being in a pandemic that is making people sick and killing people, that has exposed the disparities in economics and health in this country. And you had a very combustible mix that came to a head, and that's what we're seeing now.
As a person in my late 60s, I remember seeing the March on Washington and the marches of Martin Luther King on television. I remember learning about the Watts riots in 1965 and the activities of the Black Panthers, the fires in Newark, New Jersey in 1967, and then the LA demonstrations after the beating of Rodney King in 1992. So I'd say while attitudes have changed somewhat over time, the inequalities and unmistakably unequal application of injustice between the races, which continues on today, is still very much with us. Nowhere near enough has been done, in spite of all the time, the many good intentions, and the legislation that has been passed after all these protests. If nothing else, history shows us that there's a continuing and urgent need to awaken from our apathy and indifference and readdress these significant, continuing issues. I'm saddened that it has taken recent horrific events to again force our eyes and the eyes of a new generation open to see what is still lying just below the surface. But at the same time, I'm really encouraged by the active and outspoken participation of our children and our children's children, and hopeful that the current protests can be a turning point for change. Social media, and not just the evening news that I grew up with, is making a huge difference. It calls out injustice and gets people's attention right away. Look at the response. Everywhere, all over, people are instantly learning about and witnessing actual events. They're reacting immediately and protesting against injustice and brutality. They're holding those responsible accountable. I am hopeful that this groundswell of outrage and attention will continue to light a fire in people's hearts, minds, and souls, and that we will see true dedication and commitment to righting the ingrained wrongs of history. I'm hopeful that this struggle for equal recognition and dignity continues with a new generation of warriors who see liberty and justice for all, not as an empty slogan, but as something worthy and alive and worth fighting for.
I just want to thank everyone for coming out today. This is such a great city, full of great people, and this is a great college. It's bigger than all of us. Let the ignorant watch us, and let them see we mean business. How can you deny what's happening in this country? Ignorance is bliss. They're idiots. Ignorance is bliss. Prosecute police. No justice. No justice. No peace. Do not engage with police. They are enablers. We do not want to escalate the situation today. We have a bigger cause and we have a message to send. And violence is not the message we want to send today. What has happened in the last 2 days in Richmond was a mess. Things were destroyed and burned along with black businesses. But notice how I said things. Inanimate objects. Non-living. They were built and they can be built again. You know what can't be built again? The lives lost to police brutality in America.
Let's go,
If you are more upset about the destruction of statues and buildings than the lives lost to police brutality, you do not belong out here today. You can leave. The door is that way. Head out. We are hurt. My people are hurt. I am scared to leave the house. I have a younger brother who's 15 years old. did not fear my brother leaving the house, my father, me, my sister, all of you. The police are supposed to protect us. Who do we call when they're the criminals? Who do we call?
Also, it's very disheartening to turn on the TV every day and knowing that our Black brothers and sisters are being killed for senseless things. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And I don't do this for me. I do this for my people, for my ancestors who have fought before me, for my mother, for my brothers, for my sisters. This movement is not about me. This is bigger than you and I. And I think it's extremely important. Even being tear gassed, I still showed up and showed out. I've been protesting, marching for 13 days straight. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. Most people ask me, well, aren't you scared? To be honest, it's very nerve-wracking, but it's my civil duty. It is my job to use my voice on behalf of my people in any way that I can. So I will continue to show up and show out each and every protest. Where there's a protest, I will be.
I think history has taught us myriad things about protests. One, those that are sustained, those that have support across the various demographics, and those that are the products of a faith-based collectivism tend to be the most successful. Looking at a couple of important examples, we can look at Richmond right after the Civil War. The newly freed here were the victims of brutalities untold. And they weren't able to get redress from the Freedmen's Bureau officials here. So they met at the First African Baptist Church here in 1865 with thousands of people in attendance. And they elected a delegation of men, most of whom were faith leaders. This delegation traveled to the White House. Again, this delegation of 6 or 7 men traveled to the White House and met with President Andrew Johnson. And this was carried, by the way, in New York newspapers. And they aired their grievances, and upon their return, there were several Freedmen's Bureau leaders who were reassigned as a result of that visit. So that's an example of an early sense of collectivism. Another one that comes to mind is 1951 in Prince Edward County, where you had 16-year-old Barbara Johns lead a walkout that would become part of the landmark Brown versus Board of Education decision of 1954. Again, in 1951, in April, Barbara Johns, a 16-year-old at the Robert R. Moton High School, led a walkout to decry the deplorable conditions there. They were taught in tar paper shacks, and when it rained oftentimes, they had to actually utilize umbrellas inside the school. That story is personal to me because my father, the late Ernest Parker, was her homeroom and algebra teacher at that time. And my aunt was also a teacher there at that time. My father taught in those tar paper shacks. But when Miss Johns became sick and tired of being sick and tired, she led that walkout, and that walkout would lead to a revolution. That walkout would become one of the 5 cases bundled under Brown v. Board of Education. It was bundled along with cases from Washington, D.C., South Carolina, and Delaware, and Kansas. As I understand it, the case that originated out of her walkout, the Dorothy Davis versus Prince Edward County case, is believed to be the only one of those 5 cases. It's believed to be the only one of those cases that was initiated by a minor. So that's an example of, again, that profound sense of collectivism and still a resolve. When we look at the civil rights cases of the 1950s and the 1960s, again, we see that faith-based collectivism coupled with sustained support across various demographics, but you also see strategic initiatives and decisions, strategies that were very profound. And also you had educational opportunities in the fields of civil disobedience and the like. And so when you look at protests historically that have been successful, again, they tend to have several components of faith-based collectivism, well-defined goals and strategies, and broad support across the spectrum, if you will.
I think this protest has spread like it has all because of that horrid video of George Floyd being murdered. Now, I'll confess that in previous episodes of police violence, I have tried to take a middle road. I've tried to see both sides. I've tried to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. But this time, there are no sides, and there's no doubt. This may very well be a turning point. I think it will take more conversations like this and less digging into already entrenched positions. But it's been a turning point in my life, in my thinking about things in a very significant way. Today, as we do this, I think it's time for those Confederate monuments to go. And I would not have said that a month ago. Well, I've learned that what I thought were well-reasoned positions on things like, let's just say, the monuments, they may have been well-reasoned, but they were really self-centered. And they were not the least bit neighborly in the sense of love thy neighbor. I realized that in essence what I was saying, well, given A, B, C, and D, then you shouldn't feel threatened by the statues. Let's talk about those. You shouldn't feel maligned by them. That's in the past. You've got my reasons, A, B, C, and D. You just should get over it and move on. Well, I cringe a little bit inside. I cringe a lot when I hear myself say that. Because who am I to tell somebody how they should feel? And why should a certain person, that group of people, that race, why should they be the ones to get over it, quote unquote? Why shouldn't I be the one to get over it? Most of all, what I've learned is that I have a lot of listening to do. It was 2013 when I really became fully cognizant of the fact that my ancestors were slave owners. In May of that year, I visited the Samuel Neal Historic Home Site in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina. And the house that Samuel Neal built was still standing, and I enjoyed walking those grounds and being in the house and thinking, wow, those 18th and 19th century Neals were here, walked here. And then it also hit me, yeah, but also walking on this ground, also coming into this house, were the men and women and children that were enslaved by my family. And I didn't quite know what to do with that, and so I didn't do anything, including I didn't let myself think too much about it. I did talk about it with some people, and one of those people changed my life. It was election day of 2013. In the poll where I voted was this outgoing, lovely African-American lady that I call Sue, because I don't remember her name. And Sue would call people out if they tried to go out the door without getting a sticker. She'd, hey baby, come over here, get your sticker. So when I got out, I walked over and said, hey, you don't have to call me over. I want that sticker. Plus, I want to sit down and talk with you. And we just talked about, life, who we were, what we did, yada, yada, yada. And then I asked her, Sue, where did you grow up? She said she was not grew up in Richmond. She grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. And I kind of got chills. I said, Sue, we seem to be about the same age. Birmingham could not have been a very great place for you to grow up. And she held up her arm, her sleeve, pointed to her forearm and said, I still have some scars from the dogs. And the chills intensified. Tears came to my eye, and I finally was able to say something about the slaves at the Neal Zone. These dogs turned on her. I said, I feel like I should say I'm sorry or something. She sat up straight, looked me in the eye and said, Buck, you didn't own those slaves, and you didn't turn those dogs on me. And it was like this huge weight was gone. Since then, I have tried to use the unique position I'm in as the descendant of slave owners to try to work to bridge the racial gap in the country, and also to right at least one wrong that was done to those people by my ancestors, and that is bring those enslaved people back into the discussion today, back into history. I've done some research, and I know a couple of names, one or two stories about them. One day I'm going to write this down and put it out there. Because someone's once said, if you remember someone who's forgotten, someone who in terms of history has been dismembered, if you remember them, you put them back together and back into history. And that's what I'm trying to do.
On one hand, I believe that the sort of Black rage and resistance that we are experiencing right now is righteous. It is necessary. It is indicative of our resilience. It is indicative of our power. It is a reflection of our fight. Black rage is responsive, and so to see our people rebel, resist, even amidst the global pandemic that we are experiencing now, it makes me proud. I'm proud. I'm also tired. I'm also worried. My significant other is a law enforcement officer, and so we have been having a lot more conversations around what it means to be Black within the context of a system that is, has largely produced racist outcomes, that has largely caused harm, to our communities, right? And so we've been having more candid conversations around what it means to be Black and show up in that space and tap into one's inherent power, right? To exist in that space and push back on the powers that be, to be in that kind of space and advocate, right, for reimagining that system. We've been talking about what it means to defund the police, and as much as he is also a police officer. So personally, those are the kind of conversations that we're having, and it's necessary, right? It's necessary, and again, that in and of itself is nuanced. I'm learning, he's learning. Professionally, I've been facilitating a lot of sessions with Black folks in corporate America who are experiencing racialized trauma. The trauma of having to consume all that we are consuming in the mainstream Black death, and then show up to work. And so we've been having a lot of conversations around what it means to just process, what it means to be responsive to our own emotions and grief, which is what it is, what it means to create our own narratives while we are occupying or still part of white spaces, right? We've been having conversations with Black leaders and Black employees on what it means to organize internally so that we can hold these organizations and leaders accountable especially after so many have issued these statements. And so that's a big part of the work right now, empowering our folks, the folks that may not necessarily be protesting on the ground, but the folks who are internal to many of these organizations that play a huge part in the broader, ecosystem, social change ecosystem of what it means to organize, rise up, own our inherent power, and hold folks, largely white folks, accountable to what they say.
Hope is a funny thing. After considering the outcome of all the history that has occurred during my own lifetime, I would say my immediate reaction would be, no, I'm not especially hopeful, but I am a person of faith. And what is faith if not hope?
I feel very hopeful. First of all, because I'm a believer and I know that God is sovereign. Second of all, I am buoyed by the fact that there's been this groundswell of support by people of various demographics. There are people who are utilizing their God-given gifts like never before. Instead of standing on the sidelines and looking at perhaps some challenges as the challenges of others, people are realizing that we're all in this together.
Yes, I am hopeful. They say that nothing changes until something changes. And I think in this case it means minds have to change. And my mind has been changed. And if that's true, I think other minds can be changed. At least I hope so.
This moment is actually more than a moment, right? It is an opportunity where we will see organizations, we will see leaders continue to speak up, speak out. We will see organizations and leaders tap into their collective consciousness, grow in their understanding of systems of inequity and injustice, and hopefully feel compelled to act in sustainable ways. I am hopeful in that sense.
George Floyd! 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 George Floyd!
Thank you so much for listening and for answering our questions. Whether you agree or disagree with the comments that you heard, what we want you to take away is a willingness to initiate or continue conversations and to be a voice for change. We are so glad that you joined us today. For more information about the Black History Museum, please visit our website at blackhistorymuseum.org. Thanks so much. See you next time.